Welcome back to the Berg Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Ford.
Hey, how are you?
And Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And we just wrapped up our fiscal year. We're a 9/30 close. And so we are in the midst, actually, we just went through some of our budgeting process. And that's always a good time, right? A little budgeting, a little forecasting, trying to predict what's going to come next and hopefully use a little historical information to help us along the way.
Yeah, we have a genie in a bottle, rub it a couple times, pops out and says, hey, this is what next year is going to look like. We get 3/4 through the year and go, wait, that genie was lying to us. That's not how it worked out.
And some of it, we talk about this, some of it feels like, is it a self-fulfilling prophecy or do we actually know what we're doing at times? Like, did we get to the result because we wrote it down, or were we able to, use some of that historical information and get us to what we believe is an accurate number?
Well, I was trying to think of this saying. It's not a saying, it's a quote about those that do not history are deemed to repeat it. Or what is it's probably a military guy. I can't remember
Yeah.
Yes, shoot.
No, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those who don't know history are deemed to, doomed to repeat it.
Yeah. It's like, well, that's true, but history does have some value to it in that is how you budget going forward, because that is the most known quantity you have and the most recent quantities you have. So we use like the last 5 years in order to try and project things into the future. And each year is different, but it's amazing as we've done this more over the last couple of years that you're like, huh, that actually was right.
Like, we got pretty close.
Yes. And it's a tough thing. And it's something that we spend a lot of time on because it helps us make a lot of decisions on the team. If we're adding new members to the team, if we're, reinvesting in new, better equipment for the team to be able to do their job better. So a lot of things come out of that work that is done.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too, Ford, is we're trying to maintain a certain size, right? We're not trying to explosively grow anymore. That doesn't mean we won't take on opportunities. Doesn't mean we won't grow, but we're not just growing rampantly. We're trying to be, planful about it and be smart about growing and have the right equipment and the right people and keep everybody working and all those things. So part of it, I think, has gotten easier to budget, not only because we have more data, but because we're trying to be a certain thing, a certain size, a certain top line, all those things. And so because of that, our forecasts are naturally a little more correct, because certainly this year, I think had we continued bidding the way we did early in the year, we could have ran a bigger top line, but it just wasn't in our best interest. We weren't ready to do that. It wasn't what we wanted to do, So to some degree, it is it is like a crystal ball, because if you only want to be a certain size, then you can manage to that size.
Well, right. And I think that's actually, Brian and I were talking before we jumped on here about like an MBA, someone goes gets a master's in business. And, I said, if the three of us now went and applied for that, what would the value of that be? Because we've been in the real world and actually seen a lot of these scenarios that someone that didn't, that education would be useful to them, but we have these battle scars and everything else to understand that. And I think that's part of the maturity is that, we do want to look for opportunities. We do want to do interesting things, but at the same time, we have to be a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit more strategic in how we do that versus just jumping on the next shiny object, as we like to say.
Yeah. I mean, and we use Aiden in a lot of our podcasts recently for whatever reason. Aiden's doing a homework project and talking to Ford about it, right? But what did he say came out of that book, or what?
Which part about the difference between the college kid or someone that was college educated and someone that went right to work in the trades?
The assumption that someone who's been through college is more intelligent than someone who hasn't, and the fallacy there, right? Yeah, because there's more than one way to learn a skill, right? So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we joke about being the dumb dirt guys because people don't sometimes take it into consideration, but the amount of math that goes on a daily basis, the amount of communication that goes on a daily basis, internally, externally, all that stuff is the same. It's just that, that's not the part that's shown. This part that's shown is the big piece of metal that makes real loud noises.
Yeah, or the guy standing on the side of the road holding a sign, right? Yeah,
with the upside down pocket that holds the shovel, the PennDOT guy, that guy you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, one of the most probably interesting parts when we start to do budgeting forecasting is CapEx, so capital expenditures. So looking at what equipment we're going to buy and, why we're going to need it and all those sort of things. And that becomes a really interesting discussion because at any point from an operations standpoint, the team could make an argument, we want this piece of equipment. It's going to make everything better. It's going to make it run smoother.
More bigger now.
And for a while we did that, and one of the things we have to try and work through and all of the big construction companies, I don't mean big construction in the size of the company, but rather people doing heavy civil that have big equipment, iron, have to watch is, you build the plan and then, for us, it's October. So in October, Ford and I already have in our head an idea of like what we think we want to buy in this year. And then at times we go on a spending spree and buy a bunch of new equipment to use in the fall there to get jobs done. And then it gets to be like May or June. And I'm like, all right, well, Brian, now we're going to have to spend some of the CapEx money to get this equipment. And Brian will inevitably have a discussion with me that I had already spent the CapEx money back in October as soon as I was allowed, So that's been a really interesting piece that we've had to adjust to, is to realize that the capital expenditures, if you can spread them out, it's not only better because they're not all occurring at exactly the same time, but also it's better because you land one piece and then figure out if you need the next piece and then the other piece, what makes sense and feel out the market versus trying to guess, what equipment you need for a 12-month forecast.
Right. Yeah. And some of it's backlog driven, right? Knowing what we have coming up. And that always gets tricky too, because especially some of the cycle that we're in right now, we've talked about it a little bit, right? There's been a change in the market and, recession or, inflation or
$5 gas.
Yep. Yeah. Whatever it is that's causing it, material prices going up, supply chain issues. We're seeing it, right? In some of the bidding that we've been doing, there's work available. Sometimes they like the numbers. Sometimes they don't like the numbers. They're sending them out for rebid because it's coming in, based on those updated figures. And so that always gets a little tricky too. So we're watching the backlog. We're making these projections and assumptions based on the work that we already have scheduled, the work that we believe that we will have under contract, and then the types of work that we're going to continue to pursue and say, all right, how do these things align with how we normally generate revenue and expense?
Well, and we'll get on our soapbox here, but part of this is the news is not correct, but it's not that it's completely incorrect. And I think part of it is like where you live in the country, where you live, we have a, we'll say 75-mile radius from here in the office that we deal with. So that is like our small microeconomic,
our little bubble.
That's what we know. That's the people we deal with. That's the clientele, all that kind of stuff. And, we are seeing that it's not, the world's going to end Chicken Little level, but it is also going to tighten up a little bit coming forward. And so we're going to have to be very prudent because it's not going to be what it was 2 years ago when, the amount of emails you get on a daily basis asking for you to bid jobs is just through the roof. It's going to have to be more selective and all that kind of stuff. And we've been through it before. It's nothing new. It's just that it's a little bit of an adjustment from where we've been in the past few years.
Yeah. The interesting thing for me always in doing trend and analysis and projection is looking at the financial information and how it's changed over the periods that we're looking at, right? So a lot of times, Ford, you mentioned it, we're looking at 5-year historical averages and trends over those 5 years. And a number of things that have happened in the last 5 years that have impacted the financial outcome of any fiscal year is actually really interesting. That, the 5-year period we're looking at includes some turmoil. It includes this past 12 months where we saw some pretty record level inflation numbers on some of our materials and some of our fuel and things of that nature. It includes a shutdown. So here in PA, we had a shutdown period during COVID, 5 weeks, and the lasting impact of the 5-week shutdown, where literally we just turned the lights off for a couple weeks, or we're forced to turn the lights off for a couple weeks. So I mean, you look at those periods of time, and then you go back prior to COVID, and probably some of the busiest and best financial years that we've experienced as an organization are in that period too. So from a trend and an analysis standpoint, we're kind of all over the place here right now.
Well, you even get into the, the interest rates, you know what I mean? Which right now we're seeing rise as they try and, manage inflation in the labor market. But in that 5-year trend, you have a period of what, probably 3 years of the 5, where maybe even 4, where inflation, or not inflation, but interest rates were zero. You know what I mean? Where when historically can you base your business on, well, if I need to borrow money, it's going to cost me 0%. Now not zero, but it was close. I mean, we had a lot of equipment at zero. We were legitimately working below 1% interest. And now, you're sitting at 3.25 is the rate. So you're probably talking 6.5 if you really want to get something. You know what I mean? You're talking 5 to 6%. So, I mean, you're talking in an environment of an industry where margins are what they are, at the end of the day, you're talking that if you got used to living on 0% and it's now at 5%, you might not make any money. And you combine that with the fact that, and I don't want to be doom and gloom about it, but I do think legitimately there are a number of companies in a lot of industries that were propped up over the last couple of years by the fact that they had some government support that came out of the COVID years and the COVID money. And so Ford and I think, have both felt, Brian as well, felt for a while that there's a number of companies out there that are probably bankrupt and don't realize it. Now, we've been very fortunate. Honestly, we've done well. We've managed it well. I mean, Brian did a great job navigating that aspect, which was something none of us ever thought we'd have to navigate in terms of the finance of it. But we stayed busy. The guys stayed working. We've done a nice job through it. We continue to have a steady backlog. So I don't want to create like fear, but what I do want to do is have a realization that the market is changing out there. The players will likely change. There's going to be some changes, and we got to look through that. Now, as I look at our backlog, I feel good about it. We have a pretty strong backlog. Not as strong as it has been at times, but it's there. It's good work through the next 3 to 6 months, and the available work out there that we're seeing coming down the pike. There's still some jobs that we really like, and a number of them, in landfill and in the commercial projects. So it's one of those things where we have to do the best we can to be a client of choice. We talk about differentiating ourselves, whether it be internally with, our team feeling like we are different than other companies, or whether it be clients. So I think that's something that's really going to be important over the next, 6 to 12 months, is that every project you step on, that you do the best you can, you put your best foot forward, you try and be a good, good partner, a good heavy civil contractor, try and get the work done satisfactorily, as quickly and efficiently as we can. And, if we do that, I think we put ourselves in a really strong position coming out, 3 to 6 years.
Well, that's all very well said. I think just a couple of points for the people to understand is that, we have the same amount of team members, give or take, this year as we did last year. And our fuel bill has doubled, not up 5% or 8%. It is literally doubled just because of outside conditions. And so that goes into the effect. The other thing is, before the last 2 years, The Economist, who that's all they do is look at a glass globe. But, usually about every 8 to 10 years, there's a slight adjustment in the market. And that would have been about 2 to 3 years ago. But with COVID and all the other stuff that happened, that got delayed a little bit or got artificially adjusted. And so up until this point, we've been really working to try and tighten the ship up at all levels. The new accounting software we're doing, paying down debt, all that kind of stuff, because we need to weather the storm, because our business is cyclical, it is seasonal, and all those factors. And so trying to be the most stable possible so that we can keep weathering through it and come out the other side, and, everybody's working and those things. So those are things that are weighing on all of the people's minds, both in this room and also just in general out there. And it's one of those things that, get it out in the open, talk about it. As Dan said, it's not doom and gloom, but at the same time, it's just a realization that the market has shifted slightly from where it was 12 months ago.
Yeah. And it's both good points. And it's like a balancing act, right? Somewhere in between the two, like knowing that margins are going to tighten, knowing that we still are trying to be an employer and a partner of choice, and knowing that we got to find the middle ground between all of those things, and continue to not only survive but thrive as an organization, so that we can keep doing those things, even if there is and when there is the economic downturn.
You know what's really interesting, Bryce, is we've had a number of conversations lately talking about how the nature of on off and we can't seem to get to a middle ground like you're talking about. And when you sit in on RPM huddles, it it almost seems like you're bipolar at times. Like we'll have a discussion on the first,
Me specifically?
not you specifically. Brian is not in RPM huddles, so Brian is not bipolar. The tone of the meeting can be that different week to week. So we have our meetings Tuesday mornings, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and we're in and out. Let's say first Tuesday of the month, we might have the meeting, and the estimators are like, well, we're not seeing as much work as we'd like. We're still bidding, but there's not a lot out there. We don't feel like it's coming. The next week, we have a meeting, and they're like, okay, you're going to need to bring in 3 foremen because a lot of new jobs are coming online, and we're going to have all this work. And then the next week, it's just constantly changing, because if you had to try and, I think, like label where we are right now in terms of economics, where the economy is, it's that no one knows where it is. We're in like a state of flux. Nobody's really sure. I mean, you have inflation is up, but they're driving up interest rates to try and stem it. But the interest rates aren't slowing much down in terms of our, the overall economy. And then you have the labor market that's really tight, but now the labor market's showing a little bit of signs. The job availability or new job openings went down pretty significantly, but for the first time in 5 years. So I don't think anybody, and you got the stock market, meanwhile, it looks like a roller coaster. You know what I mean? So I don't think people really know what to expect at any level, whether it's an economist or whether it's just one of us in a ditch with a shovel. Nobody really knows. And so the best thing you can do is, we said it a couple of weeks ago, is just go out and be better tomorrow than you were today. If we keep doing what we're doing, there's a definite market for our services. And I think we are sort of a vendor of choice for a number of people. So we get out and do what we do, we'll all be fine. But we all need to sort of band together and just tighten up and realize that we need to do a good job and weather through till the next sunny day, so to speak. And we've had a rainy week here, so
Yeah, the sun is shining today.
I was about to build an arc here. It was like 5 days without any sunlight. I was getting a little
the
depressed.
First time in 5 days we've seen the sun.
Yeah. Well, I think another thing, kind of a meme that I've seen a lot of times is that, like, everyone sees in business it's just like this up arrow, right? And the reality is it's like waves. It's up, it's down. It's, you got to ride the low spot, get back to the high spot, ride the low spot. It's not this one constant climb, and you have to be able to go through all the different phases of it at the same time. And what do we say? Just one foot in front of the other, all the different things you can say, but it's just keep going, because that's the only way you win, is just by keep pushing forward. There's no way to stop in the middle. Like, people that get hurt on roller coasters, those that jump off in the middle of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and what's funny too is, and we have to go well back into our history, of when Ford started Berg Construction. But you can make real gains in the down. You know what I mean? Like, while things are not going well, you could actually pick up a lot of ground, because the market changes. Things are different, and Berg is a great example of that. Ford early on really excelled during a period when the market was turning down in 2008, one of the scariest times for most construction companies. Ford actually did very well because he identified niches that could survive, that needed his services, and was able to meet them where they needed to be. And that's sort of what I picture in my head here is, even if we turn down, as long as we've positioned ourselves with that, we haven't talked about that part of forecasting. Part of what we work together as a team to figure out is, where do we want to be? Not just, yes, we have a yellow excavator that's going to dig dirt. That's fine. But there is a lot of different markets that you can dig dirt in, and we know from historical data, that residential is going to stop at some point. It's going to slow. That commercial will slow, and you don't necessarily know the order. You have an idea, but you don't know the order. But it's one of the reasons that we're so diverse, is we believe that we can, if we keep our eyes open and see what's coming and feel the markets, we can shift and say, okay, this is going to be a better place to be right now. Let's adjust and be, more into that market until the other market comes back, and shift back and forth. So I think that's really important that everybody keeps an eye on that, in terms of, you may see us do a little bit more residential, or a little more commercial, or a little more landfill, or a little more paving. You may see that, and it is usually not by accident. It is usually by a plan that we say, like, this is where we want to go. Not always, at times, we quite honestly have gotten bigger in commercial probably than we would have liked, in a planning sense. we want to be a certain size with commercial and landfill sort of balancing each other. And because of the market, we got a little bit away from that this year and ended up a little more in commercial than landfill, which isn't where we want to be, but it was a result of the market conditions. You know, when we made it, like, as I sit here and Brian and I are looking at each other and Brian's like shaking his head, like, is it 100% accurate? We made a decision. We were not going to go crazy low in landfill. Like, landfill is a difficult work. It requires certain equipment. It's a little bit more abusive to the equipment because of what? It's specialized, all these things. And so that market demands a certain margin. And when certain of our competitors decided they were going to pull the bottom out of that, we decided, okay, well, we're not going to. Like, we're going to win at a number that we can tolerate that's good for the owner, but we're not going to pull the bottom out of this market. And it resulted in us having more commercial work. You know, and that's just something that I want the team to be mindful of, is that as we navigate this, you know, next year, that we're going to look for the best opportunities for the team to come out strong.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a great point. And you know, a lot of times if you're not part of these conversations, if you're not sitting in the room when we're meeting or when you're having these conversations with PMs, it can feel like a little bit of like a blind decision making at times, right? Because, you know, the path may not be the same this year as it was last year. And for the most part, it's intentional. So for the most part, we're trying to put ourselves in a place where our people can continue to have success.
Yeah,
and that's important.
We had a really Ford. I actually told Ford about it this morning. So I was down at Longwood yesterday. I had to meet Bancroft. So something that came up, and it's sort of relevant to this about communicating. You know, we talk about communication so much, and so Shay went down to Longwood, and Shay was there, and it was about the same time, quite honestly, that Bancroft realized what Longwood was becoming. You know, it was going from a bid job to sort of a design build where it was they wanted a lot of things. They wanted it a certain way, and they were going to need more management. So they brought in Bruce. Bruce is a very experienced, qualified, run big jobs. He actually lives in Colorado. So they brought him from Colorado from another entity, brought him here, and he's running Longwood. About the same time, we shifted Shay down there to try and give more support to John and the team down there. So the reason I bring it up is what came up is they said it was 3 months before they realized that Shay was actually the person they should talk to. Like, we sent Shay down there and we told Shay what we wanted Shay to do, and Mike knew what Shay was supposed to do and John knew what Shay was supposed to do, but none of us actually communicated to Bancroft what Shay's responsibilities was, how much authority he had. And it's sort of one of those things, like when you talk about in the meetings, that all too many times we as a team, we know what we're doing and we make a decision and we at times even communicate that to the people that are relevant, but it doesn't get beyond that. And I think that was a big piece of just having this discussion, is letting the team hear, you know, what Brian and Ford and myself might talk about as it relates to forecasting, budgeting, backlog, the market, you know, any of those things. Just let you sort of hear what we would sound like talking amongst ourselves, so you get an idea of where we are and know that we're just not running blindly, you know, even though it looks like we change directions at times.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's the whole point for this podcast, right? Is we can get hopefully the message out at all levels at the same time, versus it having to trickle down and people are busy and some things might not seep out the way that we want to. So this is one way we can just get it, spit it out there and everybody can hear it. And then if they have questions, they can ask about it, but at least it kind of gets that baseline of knowledge up higher than it was in the past.
Yeah. You know, I saw, Dan, you sent me a picture of another organization that we are familiar with doing a podcast, and they've got some pretty nice equipment. So we might need to consider an upgrade here soon. But the one thing that struck me about that picture, and not that it's good or bad, but all of those folks were sitting there with notes and laptops in front of them. And I thought it was interesting because if you watch us do our podcast, and not many people get to, I mean, every once in a while, Tracy snaps a picture or whatever. But if you watch us do our podcast, the table is empty. Maybe a water bottle or a coffee mug. We don't have laptops. We don't have notes. None of this is scripted. None of this is planned out. A lot of times it literally is just a snapshot or a glimpse into the conversations that are happening inside the office. So
that's why it always goes off the rails so quickly.
That's true too. That's true too. We have a hard time staying on topic, but I think there's value in people knowing that. And maybe it comes across that way already, but you know, that is part of the reason we do this.
It
So,
100%. 100%. It's one of the, I think my favorite things about us as a company, Berg, is that we're that open. We're that honest, that unscripted. That you just don't have to. You don't have to have a plan. When we first started, we'd make like a couple notes beforehand and say, okay, this is what we're going to talk about. And as we've gotten to it, like, at times, Predictive Index would say, like, Brian would like to know what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I'd like to know. The first time we did this, and this is funny, again, we're way off topic now, but the first time we did this, I had one of those like tripod notepads in here. And I was like, all right, let's write down some bullet points. We don't have to script this, but what are we going to talk about? And I wrote down like one thing. And that's the last time we ever used the notepad.
Well, I think we have like a text group that we're supposed to come up with ideas. And I think it's had like one time that it was put together.
I made a Teams group, and I was like, okay, just drop some ideas in here. Podcast future topics, and I put like one in there, and it was the thing's collecting dust.
Yeah, the funniest thing about this is I regularly, Ford and I'll talk, and I'll say, you'll probably actually talk to Ford and say, hey, we're going to have to do a podcast. This is how many we have out. This is where we are. Okay. Ford will come to me and say, like, hey, when are you available to do a podcast? He and I'll figure it out. And then I'll walk in and say, hey, Ford wants to do a podcast today. And you'd be like, okay, what's the topic? I'll be like, I don't know. He didn't tell me. He just said that we're going to do a podcast today. So, and then I'll, then between the three of us, we'll say like, okay, well, what are we going to talk about here? But there's times when we don't know what we're going to talk about as we sit down. Then we sit down for 2 minutes and say, what's going on, what's relevant, what's going on, and that's what we talk about. I downstairs, I'll take us off the rails a little. Downstairs, I saw this funny thing on LinkedIn. You said about the thing I sent you on Herb, and it was a picture of a stake in the middle of a field, survey stake, and it said if you're ever lost in the woods, just drive a survey stake in the grounds because an operator will run it over pretty quickly, and then they can take you back to where you're going.
Take you where you're supposed to go.
That's why we went to GPS.
We are way off topic at this point, but I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Thanks again for joining us, folks. We hope you got something from this, and we look forward to having you on another podcast.